Let's talk about the furry comic Caves and Critters, standing at a staggering 850 plus pages. It is a Dungeons and Dragons style comic with plenty of explicit sex scenes and laugh out loud comedy to keep you coming back for more. Like, no joke, do not read this comic in public. The not safe for work scenes are spread pretty far, but they are there, and the comic is not afraid to show every little detail. It kinda treats sex like Game of Thrones does. It's not the focus, but it is an important part of adult life, if that makes any sense. Anyway, you guys know me. I am super harsh when it comes to fantasy comics. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You gotta bring the heat when it comes to medieval fantasy. If Caves and Critters wants to be anything more than cookie cutter magic and swords and dragons, it's gonna have to do something more than just porn. Let's go down the checklist, shall we? Is the predominant religious body of the land hilariously evil and corrupt behind the scenes? Check. Ancient super advanced civilization that's not around anymore and we just have artifacts? Check. Going on a pilgrimage to various shrines to gather the favor of elemental spirits? Check. European castles and Germanic village architecture? Check. Scandalous outfits for the women, what few there are in this gay comic? Check. Stand-ins for chocobos. Hey, there they are. In fact, the closer I look, the more Final Fantasy X DNA I see in this comic. Specifically 10. I don't know why. This is just a real run-by-the-numbers setting that doesn't really do anything to distinguish itself from other medieval settings with swords and magic. But if the story and the characters and the artwork are any good, that can make up for a lack of setting originality, right? Turns out, yeah, Caves and Critters is a joke-a-minute comedy that's really well written in the moment-to-moment character interactions. This author clearly knows how to write likable characters and comedic situations. I care about these people, and that is no easy feat for someone like me who reads so many comics over time. Let's get into the story. We join Theron, a lion warrior whose name we only learn 50 pages into the comic, kinda weird, as he journeys across the land, righting wrongs, hitting things with his big axe, and basically being a nuisance to anything evil he comes across. Theron is what you call a resistant. That is, magic doesn't work around him very well. He can walk through magic barriers, tank lethal damage, depower people that touch him, and much more. He's basically walking anti-magic to anything that comes into contact with him. So, when he comes across a town that's being held prisoner under a magical force field bubble, not only does he just casually walk through it, but beats the pants off of its caster and takes him prisoner before the town can just hang him for their trouble. Getting away from everyone with the now depowered sorcerer Karma, nice name, he tries to introduce him to the ways of the good but aimless adventurer. Working in Theron's favor is that Karma is immediately smitten with him because, well, look at him. He tries to deny it over and over, even using the age-old method of masturbate and reevaluate. But no, he still fancies the big lug. Not only is Theron's mercy the only reason he's still alive, but the musclehead is genuinely friendly and treats him well despite all he's done. Thusly begins the journey of Theron and Karma. The comic pans out very much like a D&D campaign if your dungeon master never really thought that far ahead of the current moment. do a dungeon here, save a town from some monsters there. It's all very bite-sized and disconnected, which is honestly to the comic's strength, as really we're here for the funny jokes, nudity, and random sex scenes that pop up now and again. As any good comic should, it puts entertainment and what the audience wants to see first, which is very smart thinking. Meanwhile, Karma has issues, lots of issues, with having any kind of relationship with anyone, being an evil sorcerer and all. The will they, won't they that he has going on with Theron is actually very interesting and fun to follow. As you might imagine, Karma has a very painful past full of tragedy, personal loss, and striking betrayals that have scarred his heart, beyond the point of opening up to anyone friendly, much less in a romantic way. Paired up with Theron and his meat-headed way of just hitting things with an axe until they're not a problem anymore, these two make for a very funny and interesting pair to follow. As with any other RPG-style story, they do travel from place to place, gathering more allies to the party and so on. Just keep in mind there's no big quest here. Caves and Critters knows what it is, a fast and loose D&D campaign with porn and jokes thrown in to keep it entertaining. Heck, one of the characters is basically following the plot of Final Fantasy X, beat for beat, while his arrow ace rabbit monk friend struggles to contain his quick temper. If you're looking for originality, you're not gonna find it here. What you will find is funny writing, lovable characters, and sexy sex scenes. If you're gay, that is. I mean, I'm straight, these do nothing for me, but the love scenes can make for good character moments, bonding experiences, and the pillow talk afterward is actually pretty touching sometimes, so yeah. Normally, this is the part of the video where I comment on the overarching themes, the big ideas the comic wants to get across, or how the story's delivered. 850 some odd pages is a lot of comic after all. It must have something to say. Well, I guess the best word I could come up with is scatterbrained. What goes on in the early pages of the comic, while it was still in its growing pains era, is only really put into detail hundreds and hundreds of pages later. There's a subplot with a thief who's gathering magical necklaces from an ancient Magitech ruins for a shady entrepreneur, and then his boss is never mentioned again for about 500 pages. There's the whole Karma and the village that he put under the dome situation at the comic's very start. Never talked about or mentioned again for another 600 or 700 pages. There's an evil sorceress that gets cornered and temporarily drained of her powers because of Theron's presence, and she gets magically teleported away by an unknown third party. Never to be seen or heard from again for another 500 pages or so. This comic needs an editor to just slap this artist's hand and tell them to finish what they start before they start on something else. The early stages of the comic's lifespan is an absolute clusterfuck of dangling plot threads, unfinished stories, and unsatisfying conclusions. Again, the dungeon master with no plan at your D&D table. The comic really tested my patience while it raised question after question and plot thread after plot thread and wouldn't properly answer or conclude any of them. This comic started in 2011 and it is still going strong today, but I refuse to believe this author planned all this a decade in advance. To be fair, In the latest pages of the comic, I feel like they're cleaning up all of their old messes, giving reasons for all the dangling plot threads of yesteryear and sort of trying to tie everything together so it makes sense. This, of course, changes the comic's very nature, as what was a random RPG became a sort of epic medieval swords and sorcery story, but only so, like, after the fact. Karma talks about why he sequestered that whole town. The magic necklaces come back into play eventually, and the getaway sorceress makes her return after being absent for years of the comic's lifespan when the reader has long since forgotten about her. These plot points are so far apart they lose all their momentum between question and answer. Again, I refuse to believe this was done on purpose. But if you're patient, if you really do make it through all 850 some odd pages of the comic, eventually all of the dangling plot threads and questions and unfinished messes that this comic makes eventually come to fruition. You just gotta hang on to all those plot threads long enough so that the comic remembers what it was doing 10 years ago. The strength of... I know I sound like I'm shitting on it, but I'm not. The strength of Caves and Critters comes from its moment-to-moment character interactions and steadily improving art. This author knows how to write excellent characters, how to make clashing personalities into honestly hilarious jokes, and exactly who to pair off for some raunchy fun when the timing is right. The artwork is colorful and inviting, and anyone who's ever sat at a D&D table will have a fantastic time reading this. So, should you read Caves and Critters? I'd say yeah. It's colorful, it's funny, it's horny, it's not too deep, but you're not here for the epic fantasy. You're here to laugh at the jokes and giggle over the raunchy scenes and enjoy all the magic and the swords and the dragons, just like a good game of D&D with your pals. I say, check it out.